Good afternoon, everyone. It's today's May 18th. I'm David Bodorf, Executive Director of the Association of Indiana Counties. I want to thank everyone for their participation in this video podcast we're doing today. And we had some exciting news announced last week by Governor Holcomb's administration. Their willingness to share some federal money with cities, towns, and counties, which was not a requirement in the federal legislation. And so we're very appreciative of the fact that they're willing to share some of the CARES Act money with counties. It's so critical as revenues are declining and expectations are increasing for services. And so this additional money is going to be very beneficial to counties. The CARES Act that's referred to, federal legislation, is the Coronavirus Aid, Relief, and Economic Security Act, or CARES Act. Again, it was signed by President Trump on March 27th. And this is not to replace revenue from declining revenue due to the economic downturn. This is money to be used to replace expenses the county did not anticipate related to COVID-19. Again, this information is not legal guidance. It's not legal advice. We're just here to share with you the information we have available to us today. And some of this information may change as federal government releases more guidelines and even the state releases more guidelines regarding this money. We just want to thank all of our members for all the work you've done. Your leadership in rising up to meet this challenge has really been remarkable. The information you've shared with us has been shared with our U.S. senators, congressional delegation, of course with the governor's office and his agencies, Wes Bennett, OMB, Secretary of State Lawson has used your feedback, Paul Joyce at Board of Accounts, Luke Britt, Public Access Counselor, and nearly everything you've sent us we shared with NACO, the National Association of Counties, and it is making a difference. Your information has helped influence executive orders, state agency directives, and has even helped with federal legislation. One thing I want to point out about the CARES Act money is that there are several buckets of money dedicated that counties have access to from CARES Act. Some of the state agencies that are overseeing some of this money are OCRA, the Criminal Justice Institute, Family and Social Services Agency, State Department of Health, and the Office of Management and Budget. And I bring that up because it's critical to make sure you keep track of all the money you've received and the expenses that they're going to reimburse, because you don't want to turn in a reimbursement for a program that has already received federal dollars. Obviously, this CARES Act money is a reimbursable program, and you have to make sure you follow all the dollars you've received in the expenses you haven't been covered for yet. Some counties have already received money through CBDG, and Indianapolis, most notably, received about $168 million because of the population and size of over 500,000. So the federal legislation made a direct appropriation to them through the Treasury Department. And for the units less than 500,000, again, the state was not required to give locals that money. The next two slides give a little bit of a description of some of the federal buckets of money, a description of how it can be used, and then which state agency is helping to administer that fund. So today, really, the U.S. Treasury is the fund we're going to focus on mostly today, in this CARES Act money that is under the control of the Office of Management and Budget. But there are other funds that have been distributed through FSSA, OCRA, as I've said. Criminal Justice Institute has already paid a lot of money out to county jails. So you really have to keep track of this money and make sure you don't turn in duplicate receipts. So today we're really focused on this CARES Act money that I call non-program CARES Act money. And it's estimated about $2.4 billion that the state received. And again, they're going to share about $300 million with cities, towns, and counties. We're going to talk about the allowable expenses under U.S. Treasury, and then we'll also talk about some of the guidance from the state from the program they're making available to counties. And the state guidelines will be the dominant guidelines if there's a conflict between U.S. Treasury and the state application. So make sure that you follow the guidelines from the state if there's any conflicts. The information about the state program can be found on the Indiana Finance Authority webpage, And later on, we'll show you the U.S. Treasury guidance and where you can access that. And again, it's critical that you bookmark those websites because the information may change frequently, and you want to make sure you have the most up-to-date information. On the next slide is the IFAA webpage. On the left-hand side there, you can see with the arrow, it says Coronavirus Relief Fund. If you click on that, there's a drop-down menu. And in that drop-down menu, you can find out how much your county is scheduled to receive, the cities and towns within your county are scheduled to receive. And then there's some frequently asked questions and the reimbursement request form and the other documents that the commissioners will have to sign before they turn in these receipts for reimbursement. The CARES Act generally covers expenses related to COVID-19 that you didn't budget for. So the legislation was signed into law on the 27th of March, but it actually allows you to turn in any expenses dating back to March 1st, and that's March 1st to the end of the calendar year, or the unexpected expenses you'll be able to turn in through CARES Act if you choose to do that. Again, generally allowable expenditures, check the Treasury guidelines. We've received a lot of questions about overtime and pay related to people who have been repurposed. And again, the Treasury guidelines make a presumption that a repurposed person is going to get reimbursement, but the state is asking that we hold off on those expenses for now as far as turning them in. They want you to keep track of them, but they're not going to be the first priority for the state program. The state is really more interested at this point, I think, in reimbursement for PPE, which would be mask and face coverings, cleaning supplies, plexiglass to protect your employees when they face the public. But don't forget, other expenses related to the coroner's office are going to be eligible for reimbursement. Even some of the software you may have purchased so that your employees can work from home or so that you can have meetings available to the public through technology, some of those expenses will be reimbursable. Here's a little bit of a difference under the state CARES Act, I'll call it, where their guidance is slightly different. Again, they're focused more on PPE. So under the federal guidelines, businesses can apply for relief through the county for several different expenditures, but the state wants to focus only on PPE at the moment if a business does approach the county about reimbursement or assistance. Again, Treasury makes the assumption that any repurposed person is going to be eligible to get funding for their salary. The state is holding back on that at the moment. They're considering that, but they want to see what some of the initial expenditures are before they broaden the program. You would not be able to count sick or medical leave as far as CARES Act funding from the state. And again, same thing for people who have been repurposed into a substantially different use. Those could be eligible for expense, but again, I don't think they're going to be at the top of the priority list for the state. Again, we estimated about $180 million for counties and related entities, and so again, it's going to be the commissioners who are going to be in charge of this reimbursement program, just like for any other natural disaster. This disaster will go through the commissioners. And again, there's a list there of some of the unbudgeted expenses that could be turned in through the CARES Act. Again, the business assistance is limited to PPE equipment at this time. So any county office, county employee expenditure would be subject to reimbursement. Court personnel will come through the county, including the judges, any equipment they may have to purchase, or their employees, public defenders, prosecutors, probation. If they have to have PPE, that's going to be turned into the county, and the county will turn in those expenses to the state. Community corrections. Now, townships can come through the county. Again, the county does not have to seek reimbursement for those entities, but at the moment, that's the only access to this reimbursement program that they'll have will be through the counties. Again, you don't have to turn in receipts at all if you don't want to for the county or any other unit, but clearly it's an option, and you have to make sure that you keep receipts for all your expenditures. For the townships, there's a couple of programs available through the federal government that you might want to share with them to make sure they seek reimbursement through those programs first. There's the Firefighters Grant Program. Again, information on that is available through the FEMA website. And then this is indicative of how often this information is changing. On Friday, the federal government announced that one of the programs that would normally be a 75% federal reimbursement, 25% local, that is going to be 100% reimbursable through FEMA just for that specific grant, and that's called the SAFER grant, as you can see described there. So again, these guidelines continue to change, and we'll do our best to keep you updated whenever we get new information. The PPE for small businesses, the state did create a Ppe Marketplace, and again, that should probably be their first option to see if they can purchase PPE through there. If not, they can come through the county. We don't have guidance yet on how that would work if the businesses bought PPE on their own and then turn the receipt into the county, or if the expectation is that the county would initially buy the PPE equipment and give it to the business. But that's a policy that the commissioner should consider. But again, direct them to that marketplace through the state initially. And then if you're having trouble purchasing equipment, you may want to check out Omnia Partners, which is a former U.S. Communities program through NACO. They do have PPE equipment that they're advertising for sale. One thing about anybody's PPE equipment, you have to make sure whatever you're purchasing is actually helping with the anticipated need. We have seen or heard about examples of equipment being purchased that really wasn't as safe as advertised initially. So just a warning for everyone to be careful about any kind of PPE equipment that they do purchase. Here's a little bit of guidance from the State Board of Accounts on a memo that they put on their website on April 29th. And I know that the Auditors Conference is later this week. So the next couple of slides are guided towards reimbursement program and how those receipts will be taken care of. But each county should create a separate COVID fund, and really for each grant program that they may receive from the federal government. So in the memo from April 29th, the Board of Accounts asked counties to identify these funds, as you can see on the second PowerPoint, 8901 through 8925 would be the funds that you identify, and it should have coronavirus in the title of the fund. But again, if you create those funds without an ordinance, Board of Accounts is not going to take audit exception to that initially. So again, that's in their memo. As I mentioned earlier, each fund should have its own. Each grant should have its own COVID fund, and how we anticipate the reimbursement will get back to the original fund from which the county used to purchase any kind of COVID-related expense. So again, it is important to know that through this process, when the reimbursement comes back into the county, it has to go back into the fund for which it was originally, where that money was originally allocated. So we have got a couple questions about would this money need to be appropriated by the council. The answer is no. Again, this is a reimbursement program. It's through the commissioners, so there is no appropriation from the county council on this. And some people want to know when they'll get their money in that lump sum, and there is no lump sum coming. It's a reimbursement program. So when you go to the IFAA website, you can find how much your county has been allocated. But again, that doesn't mean you're going to get that allocation in one big lump sum. It is a reimbursement program. Again, here's more guidance from the Board of Accounts memo about how to treat the funds as they come back into the county. And it's once the disbursement is corrected, it should revert back into the general fund through the allocation. So again, I'm sure the auditors have lots of questions about how that will work specifically with their software, and because the auditors state called meeting is later this week, I'm sure that the Board of Accounts will cover that in detail. Now, also want to start to mention a little bit about FEMA on the next slide. So Again, there's the CARES Act money, and most everything that you can submit through CARES can also be submitted through FEMA. The CARES Act purchases, as I mentioned before, are March 1st through the end of the calendar year. And for FEMA, the national emergency actually backed up those eligible expenses until January 20th. And we don't know when this emergency is going to end, so there is no deadline for turning in the reimbursements. When a natural disaster occurs, usually there's a deadline as to when the reimbursable expenses will end, but we don't know when this pandemic is going to end. So as of now, that's open-ended. But if you did have expenses back to January 20th, you could turn those in. Again, you have to really think strategically about the CARES and FEMA money. In the CARES Act, there is no local match. It's 100% reimbursable through this state program. And again, most of the expenses we're going to qualify you can turn into FEMA or CARES Act. FEMA does require a 25% local match. And again, the health departments have purchased a lot of PPE, or the state health department has, and shipped it out to the counties. And so, again, you have to make sure you account for that, but don't turn that into a receipt through this state program, because, again, that's already been paid for through another CARES Act fund. We know the elections are coming up. I know that the clerks have been working closely with Secretary of State Lawson and the State Election Board, and they've sent out equipment for PPE for Election Day and early in-person voting. They are going to allow more expenses to be turned in. If your allotment didn't cover the expenses that you're going to have through the election, the Secretary of State's office is creating an application process that you'll be able to use and seek more reimbursement if the allocation of equipment you've received so far doesn't cover your expenses. On FEMA, I mean, you have to work closely with your EMA director. The application deadline to participate for the FEMA reimbursement is at the end of May. Again, that's the application deadline. That doesn't mean all your receipts have to be turned in by the end of May. So that's a critical point. But you want to make sure your EMA director is well aware of that, and that each unit has their application in to seek that reimbursement. A couple questions we've received, and again, sometimes we don't have answers yet, and the federal government is still working on guidance on this. But we've received this question several times. Can the CARES Act money be used as the local match, the 25% local match? We're still waiting on Treasury and Homeland Security to make that determination. It's been asked several times, and I'm just not sure they've come to a policy decision on whether or not the CARES Act money could be used for that 25% local match. But if it did, that would obviously allow you much more flexibility with that CARES Act money if you could stretch that out and turn almost all your receipts into the FEMA, and then only have to pay 25%, and then use the CARES Act money as your 25%. That would be a huge advantage if that would come to fruition. One thing that when you do turn in your receipts, it's probably going to be more efficient if you turn in like receipts all in one application. For instance, all your PPE equipment that you've purchased so far should probably be on one application. That'll just make the audit of that much more efficient. Again, if you turn in a receipt for overtime or personnel, that may not qualify depending on the description you turn in. So you don't want to hold up your PPE reimbursement, which should be fairly straightforward, with a request for funds that may take more investigation. So turn in similar receipts for similar purchases at the same time. We received this question: if the county hires a consultant, is that reimbursable from CARES Act? The federal government has given no indication yet if administrative costs are going to be eligible to be reimbursed through CARES Act, and so therefore the state hasn't offered any guidance on that either. Now FEMA does allow some reimbursement, but again, you want to talk to your EMA director about how much could be turned into the federal government for that reimbursement of a consultant or other administrative cost. So the other question was, how long will a county's CARE Act allocation be available? According to the federal government, it's available through the end of the calendar year. The state's guidance hasn't differed on that at this point, and it's very likely that Congress may extend that deadline past the end of the calendar year, but we're not sure. The answer to that is on the Treasury guidance that was issued May 4th, and it's on page 6 on how unspent funds are expected to be turned back to the U.S. Treasury. Another question we received: does each unit submit its own claims to the state for the CARES Act? So a county will submit county claims, again, for all the county employees, the county departments, including the judiciary and their related expenses. Cities and towns will submit on their behalf themselves. If you have a unit of government that the county created, then that unit of government is expected to come through the commissioners for their request. So like if you created the county library and the library needs PPE equipment, or they have expenses, they can turn that into the county, and the county may turn that expense in for this CARES Act reimbursement. But it would come out of the county's allocation for that. It wouldn't be separate. Same thing for townships. If you decide to do townships reimbursement, that would come out of the county's allocation. It would come through the commissioners. Again, lots of questions we've received so far about payroll and repurposed workers. The federal guidance does allow for salary and benefits. But again, I think for the state, they want to hold back on salaries at this time until they get a better indication of what kind of salaries may be turned in and make sure there's enough reimbursement money for that. So save your receipts if you have overtime or people have been repurposed. And that could be reimbursed, but at this time it's still being developed as what the state policy will be on that. Same thing on overtime. More than likely it will be reimbursable through CARES, but not definitive yet. And then again, some of those expenses could be turned into FEMA as well. So in theory, you could turn expenses into both programs, and then the one that's most advantageous, you could follow through on that when the time comes to get the reimbursement. Again, this is a little bit of a repeat, but what are the dates for the eligible expenses for CARES Act? It's March 1st of 2020, and for FEMA, it's January 20th of 2020. Again, if you have repurposed employees, keep track of their payroll. Again, payroll and benefits are referenced in Treasury guidance that was issued out on May 4th on page 3. That's the federal guidance. Again, the state, I think, is still developing how they're going to handle repurposed workers and overtime. But keep track of those expenses, definitely. Another question we received from a county was if the county has to temporarily lease a building so that they can have more space for social distancing, either for the election, for the poll workers, or even for a jury trial where you have to bring in jurors and make sure you give them space so that they can participate in the interview process. Again, the state hasn't made a determination on that yet, but under the CARES Act, again, the guidance that was issued May 4th on page 6, it talks about capital projects that are needed to prevent COVID from spreading. So it looks like, and using such a building to improve mitigation measures would most likely be reimbursable. But again, you'd want to check specifically with the state to make sure they want to make that same option available through the state's CARES Act program. A couple other bills I just want to make you aware of that are moving their way through Congress. Last Friday, a bill passed the House. It's called the HEROES Act, Health and Economic Recovery Omnibus Emergency Solutions Act. Definitely getting more scrutiny in the Senate, and not sure if this bill will pass, but there were a lot of things in that bill that were advantageous for counties, and it's probably just a starting point for additional negotiations between the House and the Senate. But some of the things in that bill that would be beneficial to counties is that the next round of funding, there would be direct reimbursement to counties for COVID-related expenses, and actually for replacement revenue. So that's the first bill we've seen that's passed one chamber or the other at the federal level that would give reimbursement or give money to counties for the slowdown in the economy. So that could help replace MBH funding, gaming revenue, or other funding that has declined due to the local economy. And again, that's going to get a lot of scrutiny before any action is probably taken on that in the Senate, but at least it's in that House bill that passed the House on Friday. It also would allow the existing CARES Act money to be used as replacement money. That would be beneficial as well. It proposes to waive the 25% local match for FEMA. So that way you could turn in your FEMA expenses to the federal government and get 100% reimbursement and not have to have that 25% local match. Something else that NACO's been working on all these issues is to make sure that people who are in the jail who are close to release would be able to be Medicaid eligible before they left the jail. So that's an easy transition when they come out of the jail, that they have a continuity of benefits when they get out of the jail. Again, that passed the House on Friday. Again, all those issues are proposed. None of them are statutory yet, but I wanted to mention those to you. So if you do talk to your U.S. senators or congressional delegation, you can mention support for different provisions of that HEROES Act before the Senate takes it up for consideration. On the next page there are just several websites I think you should try to visit and keep marked on your pages, because as new information becomes available, these will be the websites that you can use. NACO has done a phenomenal job keeping track of the federal legislation, the 4 different bills that have passed. They have a great analysis of each bill on their website. They continue to have webinars and phone calls. So if you're not signed up for those, and encourage you to visit the NACO website and try to get signed up. You can, of course, visit our webpage. The FEMA webpage continues to get updated. They have daily updates that you can sign up for to receive. The State Health Department, great resource. State Board of Accounts, they come out with guidance continuously, and they've been great partners in all this. And then the U.S. Treasury website, I pulled that up, and you can see the arrow there. If you click that middle icon, that's going to get you to the guidance that is available. And so when they come up with new frequently asked questions to U.S. Treasury, keep that bookmarked and make sure you're getting the most up-to-date information, because we do anticipate more information become available. And before we take questions, I just want to speak on behalf of Association of United Counties and all of our employees. The work you all have been doing has just been so inspiring. I mean, nobody ever signed up for office to try to battle this type of a situation. The challenge is unprecedented, of course, and counties have just done a phenomenal job of meeting that challenge, be it the commissioners passing ordinances, each office trying to make sure that there's a continuity of government, from the recorder's office to the assessor's office, treasurer's office. Tax bills went out. You're collecting taxes for all the other units of government, and just phenomenal the work you've done. And it really is inspiring to see people go through this process. There's never been a drill for this, right? This is live action, learning as we go, and you all have just done a tremendous job, and we just so appreciate the opportunity to try to help you out. So anything that we can do to be of assistance, please email us and we'll do our best. We're not going to know all the answers right away, but if we don't know the answer, hopefully we know where we can get a good answer for you. So with that, we're going to turn it over to some questions. No questions at this point? Okay. So again, if you watch this video, please feel free to share it with your other elected officials after you watch it. If you have questions, just email them to us, and we'll do our best to try to get a response as quick as we can. On the CARES Act money through the state, once you turn it in, once this program's all set up, we anticipate that reimbursement only being about 10 to 14 days. Again, that's still being developed, so they're reviewing that process. And once they have all the administrative costs or all the administrative process worked out, we think that'll be a very efficient system for reimbursement. And again, you have to be strategic about which programs you want to use for reimbursement, FEMA reimbursement, CARES Act reimbursement, or again, there may be other grants out there through OCRA, Criminal Justice Institute, even FSSA for assisting people with food that could be available to you. and make sure you take advantage of all the CARES Act money that's available. So it doesn't appear we have any questions. Again, thanks everyone for either watching live today or watching the recorded version, and look forward to hopefully seeing you all soon. We'll be able to get out and visit counties, we hope, within the next few weeks or month, because just like you, we're all ready to get out and visit with others and see what we can do to help you. So appreciate all your assistance, and let us know if there's anything we can do to help. Thanks.